because I want to talk about the idea of representation. And I think it's really, really important that we talk about the idea of representation, because I think its power as an artistic tool has been taken away from us, the people. Representation, as it relates to art, has basically been repurposed. It used to mean something very specifically artistic. It used to mean how a particular subject matter was given the right artistic form. It was about how reality was turned into art, and it was given back to us. It was literally represented. We can go back to Aristotle and his idea of mimesis, life imitating art, or art imitating life, if you want to go Oscar Wilde. But now it just doesn't mean that anymore. It's actually it's not an artistic value anymore. It's actually a policy. Representation is a policy, and more importantly, it's an attitude, or even an ideology, if you want, that informs this policy. This policy is what people often call woke, and for me, when people talk about woke, it's a signpost. What they really want to talk, when they use the word woke, is a kind of Philistinism, because it's an attack on art. It's an attack on our common humanity. It's a way of thinking that imposes a very particular and very narrow, anti-artistic understanding of representation on creative expression. Specifically, it means quotas. It means the depiction of predetermined groups and categories of people in the correct numbers and shown in the correct way, in the sensitive way. And behind all this is like a new underlying rule of people divided into these categories. They must see themselves, Meghan Markle goes on about representation matters. Otherwise, other art would be systemically perpetuating racism and sexism, etc. And who would want that? But even if you choose to argue over the pros and cons of this kind of new representation, what's happening in the most fundamental sense, I think, is the imposition of a new set of ideological rules of art. What art has to show, how art has to be made. It's not really actually censorship, but as Agnieszka said before, it's compelled creation. Art, of course, always had rules. It has rules. All art forms have rules. But the important thing about artistic rules is that they don't come from outside art itself. They come out of the process of learning art and doing art. They are inherent in the art forms. For example, in poetry, a sonnet has 14 lines. That's the rules. Yeah. Or if you want to be more profane about it, a sitcom has a situation and a comedy. That's the rule. Or on screen, if a character moves from right to left, then something's wrong with him. We know it somehow, but we don't know why. That's an artistic rule. And the most important thing is that these rules, they're not arbitrary. They're actually the sum total of our accumulated wisdom. They're the inherent rules of the creative process that all artists ought to know, or should, so that they can create. The other half of the equation is that we as an audience know these rules and we can intuit them. So we sort of know what's going on and why. And we recognize them even when we can't explain it. And that's because these rules are in fact universal. They are the foundation of our shared collective imagination. They're the reason we can communicate to one another through all these different art forms, and we can still make sense of one another. So it's really this very fundamental, basic rule of art that has been taken away from us. Yeah? The idea that art represents life. I would say that the idea of representation has been colonized, if I want to be cheeky. It's been colonized by the cultural elite, right? It no longer means turning a subject into art through the rules of art, representation has actually come to mean a specific way of seeing and understanding people. And I don't think it's a particularly healthy or nice way of understanding and seeing people. It's actually horribly reductive and instrumental, because it doesn't treat people as individuals in and of themselves, with individual lives, stories, imaginations. But it actually boxes us all off from one another and treats us as abstract signs and signifiers of social relations. It reduces us, as Thom said, to symbols of a group, as a kind of eternal, mutually antagonistic power dynamic where people are divided along the lines of race and gender, etc., etc., etc. So, and when you see that, then you can actually see that this kind of colonization of the idea of representation of art loses its own internal logic and integrity. This is why people think it's so Philistine, right? These formal artistic rules are not there anymore. Yeah, it has nothing to say about the nature of art or the artistic experience anymore, about sort of life as we know it. And by putting us all into boxes, it also has weakened any claim that art has only universality, as being something accessible to everybody. So in a nutshell, the creative classes have robbed people of the enjoyment of art, and we're only allowed to make and understand art according to the new rules. And I don't think that's any surprise that people are alienated from art in this day and age. So, and I think the thing is, though, if we want to defend art from being colonized in this way, there's no way back to the old idea of representation. I think it's been tainted. We can't rescue it. So we need a new way of talking about art that reasserts the primacy of a shared imagination that is filled with the energy of a shared humanity. And if you look, my favorite thing, at Hollywood cinema, yes, just as an example, because it's actually one of the most successful art forms in the world. And it did so, and it did become so by synthesizing life as most people experienced it. And building on these commonly understood rules and narratives that were already established in culture. All the time innovating as well in what kind of stories could be told and how they could be told. I think art has to reconnect with that kind of cultural vitality. So art needs to become populist again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is how we can start to reimagine what representation means in art, to find the freedom and inspiration to craft art and culture that resonate with our shared imagination.
Thank you.